Let's take a look at some of the local and statewide elections. Alex Ositis is tracking Florida amendments on the ballot tonight. So, Alex, we know the polls close in less than 2 hours. Kind of walk us through what we'll be seeing tonight when results start to come in.
Sure thing, Anthony. And on your screen, you'll see the amendments in Florida. And next to it, it'll be the percentage of yes or a no. And while there are still some people casting their ballots here in Neptune Beach, there is some the 6 amendments that you'll see tonight, including what could deal with Florida's minimum wage. I want to go over some of those with you now. Amendment 1 is about who can vote. To cast a ballot in Florida, you must be 18 and a resident of Florida and registered to vote. If you meet those requirements, the Constitution says every citizen can vote. If passed, Amendment 1 would change that language from every citizen to only citizens. Amendment 2 on Florida ballots looks at increasing the minimum wage. If passed by 60% of voters, the minimum wage in Florida would raise to $15 by 2026 and $12 for tipped employees. Amendment 3, if passed, would do 2 things that could impact future elections. First, it would open up primaries so all voters, not just party registered, could vote. Second, the top 2 finishing candidates, regardless of party, would go on to a general election, meaning that could pit 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans, not just one of each, against each other. Amendment 4 relates to constitutional amendments in Florida. A yes vote would mean voters must approve a measure with 60% of the vote in 2 consecutive general elections. A no vote would keep the current approval process in place with just a single election. Amendment 5 on Florida ballots this year is about carrying over a possible exemption for your property taxes. A yes vote supports extending the deadlines 3 years. A no vote supports keeping the current 2-year window. Finally, Amendment 6 on Florida ballots is about property taxes and an exemption carried over by the surviving spouses of disabled veterans. A yes vote supports passing the credit to the spouse of a disabled veteran after death. A no vote would mean the credit stops when the disabled veteran dies. So there's a little refresher for you after you've cast your ballot and what you'll see on your screens coming up tonight. Still ahead at 6 o'clock. If any of these amendments pass, when would they take effect? I'll explain coming up. Reporting live in Neptune Beach, Alex Ositis, First Coast News on your side.
They need 60%.